Hello everybody, I'm Cynthia Sears, and this is the very last open book tour of 2016. I'm so thrilled that we have as our tour guide Catherine Alice Michaelis, known for short as Mrs. Catherine Alice Michaelis. And in a year in which we've had some surprises that were not so swell, I was especially delighted that Catherine was a featured artist in Craft in America, which many of you saw premiered here in the auditorium. It will be shown on PBS on the eve of Earth Day, so that's April 21st, right?
10 p.m.
At 10 p.m. Except maybe not here because our scheduling is a little bit different. I'm also thrilled that she was able to give us the wonderful display that is downstairs in the Mesa Gallery right now, and that she is giving this talk today. And as you know, she is a absolutely first-rate bookmaker, printer, fine press printer, maker of all kinds of art, usually plant-based, both thematically and with her materials. But you'll hear all about that in the next hour. Thank you. Catherine?
Thank you, Cynthia. I have my bifocals. I don't know if I'll need them, but it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming from near and far. So I want to start today talking about two books, and these books have been made with eco paper. And eco paper, if you haven't been down to the Mesa Gallery, there's a whole wall. These two books are in a vitrine, which is why I want to show a lot of work that's in the show downstairs. And a lot of the work, printed and unprinted, or paper, is up on the wall, pinned up, and you can see it. So this is made by taking a white, commercially made paper. It's primarily cotton, or this is all cotton, because you need a natural fiber paper, and bundling it up with plants and submersing it in hot water. Actually, Kate was at the workshop where I learned how to do this, although I don't think any of the paper that we did came out as rich as this. It's been a long learning process to figure out how to do this. And it just takes a lot of experimentation. And so some of you know my husband Bill, and some of you don't, but he's much more of an experimenter, and I'm much more of a, I don't know, I just have an idea, and I just go down the road, like, there it is. But he'll play and he'll experiment. And we wanted to make this book, Soil Dwellers, for a show celebrating the Year of Dirt. And this book is about mostly the insects in the ground, primarily the springtail. And Emily Van Clay wrote most of the poetry that's in the book. So she was focusing on all the insecty work, and Bill and I were making all of the eco paper. Well, Bill got really into the eco paper and started trying to kind of give a sense of soil structure and soil layers and all of that, and was putting so much work and effort into this paper that I decided the two of us had to make a book. Bill is so integral to everything that happens in my studio now that it didn't feel right that his name doesn't go on anything. So together we made this book called Solar Return. So this book celebrates a year of gathering plant material in the garden and dyeing the paper. And that process started even before Soil Dwellers, because we had been making paper and setting it aside before the Soil Dwellers project came up. So this book, Solar Return, it's bound with a Coptic stitch that's an exposed spine sewing, and has a little bit more paper inside the box. And I want to start with the quote. There is some information in this book that describes the process. It has a half title, and now the glasses there. And a little quote at the beginning from Emily Dickinson. It says, "I hope your rambles have been sweet and your reveries spacious." And I chose this quote because I feel like the papers are their own world, that you can just go into all the details and colors and shapes and layers and just feel like you're in a universe of color and nature and all of these things. And sometimes the paper, I feel like I'm rambling across it, and sometimes I'm just sinking into it, like how you might move across a meadow or how you might just come upon something on the ground and just go, wow. And every book has aspects of that. So every piece of paper is unique because of this process. Every book has its own set of paper that won't be replicated in any other book. But each book, when I sort these papers together, I try to bring together a suggestion of all of these things for each book. So some of the pages have like suns. I think of them as suns. And I think of them as marking the days of the week or the hours of the day. So you'll see pages like that. You'll see pages that are more kind of as you come across something, like the trail opens up, or you come upon this, you wake up and everything's covered with frost, or the meadow is bloomed. So some of the pages are more, to me, they're like that. Here's one of the pages that is divided into chapters. So the book is meant to just feature the eco paper, but I divided it by season, and every season has a list of plants. And those were plants that were largely gathered during that season. And it didn't mean that they were limited to being used for that season, but that's when it was harvest time for those plants. So those have pages that have kind of a clear area primarily to print on. So when I did Soil Dwellers, I needed paper that I could print poetry over. And when I did Solar Return, I wanted paper that I didn't have to worry about that, and we could just go crazy with the eco printing. And then this one has like a little microscope where you're kind of looking in and you're getting to see a little plant. This is more of like a stencil, I think, and I'm not sure what that is. It could be a dried seed head of something like a sedum. I think the stem is too skinny for that. Or it could be a kale flower, although I think it would be a little more yellow if it was a kale. I think it's a dried flower because I think it's later in the year. Here's another one that I think just kind of opens on like a sun kind of on the landscape. Thank you. And here's another one that I think is just this beautiful wintry kind of, frosty, yeah. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm going to hand it around, and you can look at it. But I just wanted to give you a sense of what we were thinking as we created this book. And like I said, they're all unique. Cynthia, I believe, has 2 in the collection. There's one down in the vitrine, and there's many of the papers up on the wall. And then just to briefly introduce Soil Dwellers. Because Soil Dwellers is about an insect, or insects, the book was created in 3 sections and 6 pieces of paper. Initially, this was going to be 2 pieces of paper, and I asked Emily Van Clay and Emily Bess if they would collaborate with me. Emily Bess is an entomologist, and Emily Van Clay is an amazing poet. She's a nationally renowned, award-winning poet, and she lives in Olympia. So we kept coming together to decide what will this book be, and in that process it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then partway through, Emily Van Clay asked, can our book make a sound? And so then we brought in a musician, and that's Melanie Valera, and she did a musical score. And Emily Bass gave her some sounds of insects underground. And that was how she made the musical score for Soil Dwellers. So this is what this is. This is a photopolymer, but everything else is handset type in the book. And every one is different. So because of that, oh, I do want to mention, though, that there's 2 poems, one in the front and one in the back. There's a text by Linnaeus about soil, where he wrote about soil. And then I did a subtractive or an extractive poem where I took words out and created my own poem. And those words are in bold in the main text block. And there's another one at the beginning. You kind of have to go under the title page. So, and then there's our list of collaborators. And then if everybody likes to look at the back of the insect. So you open to the back, and there's the colophon that has our signatures and a little description of our project. So let me see, how does this go? It goes like that. So I actually brought 3 copies of this because they're all so different. And I'll pass 1 this way and 2 this way if you'd like to look at that. And then it's been a really amazing year for me with Craft in America and the show in the Mesa Gallery. And also I've been working with Cynthia and Amy to video a lot of the work in the collection and spending a lot of time at the museum. And it's been an extraordinary experience, actually, to be here. There's so many volunteers. There's so many amazing donors and people who are involved in the museum in different ways that I just feel changed by that. And I think it's the whole year and it's everything, but it's really affected me profoundly. And when I'm here and the museum is free every single day, and all of these people are working like a family, I don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. I have been behind the scenes a little bit, but there just seems to be so much kindness and generosity. And as an artist, I've been treated so sweetly by everyone here. And it's inspired me to ask myself, what can I do? How can I give? How can I be more generous? And that's been seeping through me all year. And so at all of my events and things that I've been doing here at the museum, I've been creating little keepsakes for everyone. And so I brought a little keepsake for everyone today, and I'm going to just hand these down and you can take one. And these have the Emily Dickinson quote inside, and then it's a little piece of the eco-printed paper that you can have as your own sample. I was going to sew them in, but I didn't get the press cleaned until 11 o'clock last night. So you can sew them in yourselves, or you can keep them as they are, whatever you want to do. So those are for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Are there 2?
No, you just take one.
Just take one.
There's one, some of them have a little flap and some of them don't. But they're all the same kind of thing. And yeah, but they're all the same inside. There's nothing, the paper inside. Make sure you have a paper inside because there might be one sleeve that doesn't have a paper inside.
Thank you so much for sharing not only the work, but what goes in behind it as it evolves organically in your concepts, because that's half the fun, is to see how it germinates and goes this way and that way, you know, that whole sense of process.
Yeah, thank you. And if anyone has any questions, please interrupt me and ask your questions.
So we have a question. Catherine.
Sure.
You haven't said anything about washing hands or handling or gloves.
Yeah, I didn't think about it.
Okay. All right. Good.
I think, you know, it's usually on the sign up that asks you to come in with clean hands.
Okay.
So I'm just assuming. Also, the eco paper is so forgiving. It's already been through hell. You know, it's been wrapped essentially in compost and put in a pot of boiling water. And when I am done, my hands are really stained and awful, and I just keep handling and handling and handling. So everything that happens to that paper just seems like it's part of it. So, and then after it comes out, it's super wrinkled, and I have to flatten it, I have to smash it, you know, I have to get it wet again.
biodynamic
These
process.
can handle it, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So another piece I'll talk about that's in the show that I have not yet had the opportunity to talk about is called Sola, a mythical story about a real girl. And this book was made actually a year ago in January is when I printed it. The process took a long time for a show at the UW in Seattle that was called Just One Look. It was about women in vision. And it was in conjunction with the classics department. Lauren Dudley and Sandra Krupa headed that project. And everyone in the project was given a text from the classics to respond to sonic phrastic. So we were given a text and we had to create an artist book. And Lou Cabine was one of those artists, and so was Kate Leonard. And this is not a pristine copy, and I didn't realize till just now how not pristine it is. This was like a registration page where the type wasn't in the right spot. So this is all pressure printed, and this also has a big wall downstairs, and you can see some of the plates, and those plates are made by cutting out pieces of paper and layering them to create highs and lows. And then I run it over a block of plexiglass that's in the press. And the plate is behind the paper, rolling over the inked plate. And so it picks up the highs and lows. So this book is a response to a story that's told by Paul Cheochtan Wagner. It's a Salish story. I was glad that not all the classics were Greek and Roman, so there's some diversity. And in that story, there's a young girl who's walking the beach, and she's grieving because she feels abandoned by her family and by her community. And the tears just keep pouring out. But then she comes upon this mer woman on a rock or on the beach or whatever, and this mer woman engages her and takes her on a healing journey under the water. And she has a vision while she's under the water. She sees water people. They're like there's land people and there's water people. And she sees the water people and their way of life, and she has this healing experience. And she comes back out onto the beach, and she says to the woman, the mer woman, she says, "Oh, wow, everything is wonderful. I understand now, and I'm a human person. I'm a land person." And the mer woman says, "No, you're a water person, an ocean person, but now you're stuck in this earth person body because you didn't recognize your people." And the story shocked me, honestly. I just, maybe I'm too used to the happy endings, but I was pretty surprised. And I spent a long time thinking, how am I going to respond to this story? And what I finally decided was that I was going to start where this story ended, with my own story. So I also felt abandoned by my family, and I won't say my village because I'm quite positive. I know I left my village quite consciously, but I did not grow up in a warm, cozy family, and I came out as a lesbian when I was 20, and my mother, when I was like 21, 22, my mother just said, "Why do you tell me all these things? Do you make them up just to try me?" And I'm like, "No, Mom, I'm trying to, share what's important to me with you." And she said, "Please stop telling me things." And I think I was 21 or 22 years old when my mom said that to me, and I was really, really hurt. And it just became this shutting down. I mean, there was never a lot of intimacy or communication between my mom, but that was, that really closed the door. And coming out as a lesbian before that had been really hard, and it had also closed off family to me. So I could really relate to that part of the story. So what I decided I was going to do is revisit my emotions and feelings around abandonment and find my own healing journey. And it's not like I hadn't been doing that for 30 years, but I obviously wasn't done with it. It was clear to me. My mom passed away a few years ago, and it was just obvious that I wasn't done with that. So the first few months of working on this book, I was super depressed because that's what I was sitting with. And I was trying to figure out, what do I do with this? How do I transform this? And then as the deadline loomed nearer, I realized I really need to put the pressure on. So the book starts out with sort of some symbolic moments, is what I'm going to call them. Everything in the book is true. There might be one metaphor in this book, but everything else is true. And I'm going to let you decide. But I called it mythical because I wasn't sure that people would really be able to take it in as a true story because of the way that it's written. And I don't know if I have anything else to say about Sola. Sola was the name that my parents picked for me before I was born and then did not give me. So that's why it's called Sola. So it kind of feels like I have this alternate self. And I think it ends really wonderfully. I do feel like I had my vision. I didn't feel like I had my vision. I did have my vision. And it was very transformative and healing for me. And I'm good with it. I'm good with things now. So anyway, I'll pass this one this way. I know Kate has seen it. Are there any questions about anything so far? Is everyone good? Okay. Let's see. What next? I'm going to talk about, can anyone tell me the time?
It's 11:22.
Oh, we're doing great. Oh, and here is my book called Mother Time, Measuring by the Moon. I did not do that on purpose. This book is also pressure printed. Pressure printing is a printing technique that I really, really love. And for me, I'm not an illustrator. I'm not like this amazing drawer of things. And I came into making artist books as more of a writer than a visual artist. So for many, many years, I struggled with the image making in my books, or I got really creative with the image making in my books. If you look at Solar Return, you know, the plants do all the image making for me. I did do the lino cuts in Soil Dwellers. So the pressure printing for me is a process that I have much more ease with than trying to draw something and make a plate from, even though I have done that. So I use it a lot, and I really like the printing technique. I like how soft it is. And I'd been doing it for a long time and making pieces that were one color images like the Sola. But for Mother Time, I wanted to start playing around with layering color. I did a little bit of this in A Revealing History of Women's Underwear, which is a book that is downstairs that I did not bring today. But this was just a further exploration of how can I do pressure printing, how can I layer color, and also I'd been studying sacred geometry for 3 years. I was part of a group. We met every other Sunday for 3 years, and we used a compass, a straight edge, and a pencil to make our work. And we studied a lot of things, or I studied a lot of things culturally and historically that related to that. And so for Mother Time, I wanted to sort of collect a lot of those ways that numbers in relation to the moon had been significant for different cultures around the world. I'll read you one of the pages. Maybe one of my favorites. So for this one, besides the doubling of 30, 60 has its own measure in the moon and correspondence to the earth. For example, 6 times 6 times 60 equals 2,160. the moon's diameter in miles. And in the ancient Hindu system of measure, there are 21,600 breaths per day to equal 10 times the moon's diameter. Breaths meaning like in our human bodies. The mean distance between the Earth and Moon is 60 times 60 times 60, 216,000 miles. Could this be why ancient Sumerians chose a base 60 system for measurement, thereby keeping in perspective their relationship to the moon, sun, and the planets? This system is still used today to measure the minutes and hours of our days. So this is a little example of what's in Mother Time. 2 of the pages are framed up on the wall in the gallery, and then there's multiple prints that are framed on the wall. I think all but 2 of those prints are for sale. Only 2 of those prints are in the book. Most of them were prints that I made while just exploring designs for the book. So it made a one-off or 2 or 3 in some cases of just playing with color and combination of stencils. Some of these stencils repeat over and over in the book or on the wall, and some of them are only used once. And that might be because they're a 60-based or a 6-based design or a 28-based design. So the moon takes 28 days to go around, as most of us know. And that's why supposedly the chessboard was created with 28 squares around the parameter, because this represented the influence of the moon upon our everyday life and all that we did, like almost as if it's ruled by the moon. So the game of chess even has a moon relationship, and I believe that that's in here. I wanted to do, or I eventually would hope to do, a book for every planet. I think that would be really fun. I know the moon's not a planet, but and I was thinking about actually Saturn and Father Time, and the Bainbridge Island Arts and Crafts Gallery was doing a show on the moon, and they asked me if I could make something. And so I just jumped in and I made the moon, and I haven't done any of the others. I did make a piece about Venus, and this was done way before the moon. And this is a little bit about the relationship between Venus and Earth and its geometries and significance in numbers and patterns. So if you like that kind of thing. And I also want to talk a little bit about my subscription series. But before I do that, have you all seen Lost in Japan, or most of you, are you familiar with Lost in Japan? This was a book I did in, I always have to look, 1999. And I had been taking care of a woman, Alice Turnbull, in the last months of her life. She had ovarian cancer. And she had lived in Japan in the 50s and 60s, and she had collected a lot of Japanese paper. She also kept the wrappers from the stores that she shopped at. In Japan, you go shopping and every store has its paper. They wrap up your thing. They'll even do this at the bakery, which is really annoying when you want to eat your pastry on the way home, which like Japanese people don't do. They don't eat while they're riding on their bike, tearing into their bike basket to get at their pastries. So I was a little annoyed, and I wish I'd met Alice before I was in Japan, because I would have recognized, appreciated more all of my papers that things were wrapped in. But Alice had saved all of these, and they were behind her spare bedroom door. And I asked Alice, do you ever do anything with any of these papers? Why are they all still here? And she said, oh, well, every now and then I take them and I lay them out on the floor and I roll around on them naked. Well, that's pretty good. So when Alice passed away, her son gave me this big fat roll of papers. And I put them in my flat files with all of my Japanese papers. And within days, I was immediately so jealous, because all I could think about was, who's going to get those papers when I'm dead? And I couldn't bear it. I'm like, okay, do I need to put someone's name on these? Like, who would be deserving? I mean, Kate Leonard is probably the only person I could hand over my Japanese paper to. It's just like, I just don't like this at all. I just don't like this. And of course, they're like these beautiful vintage Japanese papers, and I also didn't want to cut them up or, like I didn't know what to do with them. I don't do collage normally, so like that didn't even enter my mind. So after a while, I realized I just have to make my own project out of these papers. That was the only way. And if I made an edition, then I would get to keep like sample pages of these. So I kept like 5 of these. And they're down in, or maybe 6 now because I got my mom's. But they're down in one case, and you can see how they're all different a little bit. I mean, they're open to different pages. But they're all the covers are made from store wrap that Alice had saved. And then the insides are a blend of her vintage papers and some of my Japanese papers. So these also are all quite unique. Each book has its own combination of papers. They all have a stamp on the title page. Some of them were my stamps from Letters from Japan. This is one of my favorite of all the sheets. And these stencils don't go away in Japan. They reprint them occasionally, but they'll do them in different colors. They have little stories about me growing up and living in Japan a little bit. Some of them are kind of silly, but they're mostly in relation to either China or Japan. They have a little map, little Japanese language sheet, and then they all have a kirigami crane in the middle. And these are mostly all different pieces of paper as well. So I'm trying to make each one as unique as possible while creating an edition. So they all have the same text on white paper with blue stars, but a different combination of papers and covers. They all have a little telephone directory with the same numbers, and they all have a ginkgo leaf. And they all have a little found poem of directions to Harajuku, or actually to a kimono shop, a used kimono shop in Harajuku. I'm sure it's still there. And then in the back, on a page where I printed coins, there's a little envelope, and every envelope is a different piece of paper, and everyone has a 5-yen coin inside. Because at New Year's time, people will put little 5-yen coins, especially in the shops and things, as a little good luck thing at New Year's. So this is lost in Japan. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention it is because, like Soil Dwellers, like Solar Return, I created it so that there were unique copies within the edition. And that's something I really love to do. I like to make all of the copies different, even though they're an edition, so that I don't get bored. Is really what it's about. It's like I get bored if I'm making a big edition, and I find it just fascinating. And I think back to my childhood when I could play with my mother's buttons forever, and I would sort them around. I'd also play with my mother's perfume bottles. And I don't know why she had so many perfume bottles, because they were mostly empty, but she did. And I would love to arrange and play with her perfume bottles. So I've always loved this kind of sorting and arranging, which is probably how I came to be a letterpress printer.
But it's such a lovely way to honor each individual who buys
Yeah.
the series, because everyone's different, and so each one is unique, even if it's
Yes. Most people don't get a choice of what copy they get, but it's nice. You can know that you have something that's a little unique. And so that's lost in Japan. So I'm often trying to create variations within an edition. And while I'm talking about that too, loving printing and feeling like it was a natural fit for me, I'm going to introduce Raina and Jay Holtz, who house Laughing Dog Press, which was where I learned to print when I lived on Vashon Island. I came and cranked the wheel and helped them produce work that was about social justice and environmental causes and poets. And that has been really significant for me as well and influenced a lot of my work. On that theme, I want to move to talking a little bit about my subscription. I had a subscription that started maybe in 94 or 95, I can't remember for sure. And out of that subscription, I created 2 or 3 things a year. People paid in advance. It was always going to be plant themed. And I don't know, I want to say it was like $45 or $50. It was very, 45. And the idea was that you got something at like a wholesale price. So, and then I would print, like if I had 60 subscribers, I might make 70, and I would have 10 extra copies to sell. And that was really, really fun until it wasn't. I tried, the idea behind it when I first started was I was going to use all these end cuts. I was going to get really creative and throw together all these piles of things in my studio and take risks, and people were going to be really excited to get them in the mail, and they would be really different, and I would feel free to play. But what happened was people had already paid for them, and I felt really, really nervous, and I wanted everyone to really like every piece that they got, and I ended up, buying paper and putting lots and lots of work into them, and it was really, really great. And I think I did it for 5 years or something, but towards the end, I felt like I just had too much pressure on myself. But one of the most fun projects that I did was called Miss Floralia. I know Cynthia loves Miss Floralia too. And Miss Floralia is a beauty pageant for flowers. And what I did was, okay, so you have to look, because this is Miss Floralia's sash for 2009. So it says Miss Floralia on it. And what I did is I sent out to all my subscribers these cards. And these are linoleum cuts, and then they're hand colored. And on the back of all the cards is a little Q&A with that flower. And the host is Mr. Billy Bumble, because there's always, a male host of the beauty pageants. And Bill is my husband's name. So this is Billy Bumble, and of course he's quite familiar with the garden. And so he has a little letterpress introduction. And I want to tell you, everything you see here is going to be handset type. I have only produced 1 book with photopolymer, so everything is handset type. And the reason that it's all handset type is because I never know until the last minute what the heck I'm going to do. I can't plan far enough in ahead to do photopolymer. So, and I can't commit myself. Like, I want to change my mind at the last minute. So anyway, there's Mr. Billy Bumble, and then there's all the different flowers. And they all have their little interview. They're all asked the same questions. They all have different answers. And I asked each subscriber to fill out the ballot and send it back to me. And so they did, and that was how the winner was chosen. But because I was doing this is also when I started a blog, because I wanted subscribers and people to be able to, if they wanted to follow along with what was going on, they could do that. This is an example of one of the ballots that I got back. I think this is a photocopy. I'm not really sure. It feels different to me. Oh, I think she photocopied it and sent it back is what happened. So people wrote me wacky notes and things, and it was really, really funny. And this person said she voted for Miss Zinnia, and one of the reasons was because she doesn't like to be pollinated, which is really weird. Yeah. So I have to tell you, I don't remember who that is. I'd have to look up her juror number. I have an idea. But one of the things it says, and here's Miss Zinnia. I was going to say Miss Zinnia. The zinnia flower has the most pollinators of any other flower, or as many as any other flower in the garden. It has so many pollinators that, it's not that she doesn't have any, it's that she has them all. So someone kind of misread that and voted for Miss Zinnia. And then what I did, although Miss Zinnia still did not win, Miss Allium won. So after all the ballots had come in and I tallied, I printed this wrapper. I put the winner, Miss Allium, on the front of the wrapper. And then I also decided, you know how there's also always a Miss Congeniality, but she's never one of the runners-up. So I only sent the runners-up to everybody. So I decided that Miss Coneflower would be the Miss Congeniality. And I made a Miss Coneflower for the inside with her little title. And then the subscriber, when they got this, could reverse this, put all their cards inside, and tie it up with the little sash. And there you have your Miss Allium 2009. So it was so delightful to work with my subscribers and do something like this. And I just would love to be able to do more projects like that. And in that vein, I did come up with a project that's called Button Box. And Button Box was born a year and a half ago, the weekend, I believe it was that weekend that I was here. There was a book art show, Carpe Librum, that Cynthia had curated up at the Bainbridge Island Arts and Crafts. And I was one of a panelists with Lou here at the museum in the auditorium. And I was showing some of my embroidered books. And people got so excited, were coming up to me and talking about the people in their life who sewed, and this special button, or this special sewing kit, or this special something. And I was so moved at how people responded. It's like it touched this really deep place within people. So I decided I was going to create a community button box, and I was going to ask people for a button and a piece of text to go with that button. And I did this. I put a call out. I got all these stories in. Actually, Jay and Raina's son, Morgan, is a fine woodworker, and I've commissioned him to build this box. So hopefully in a year or less, you will be able to see this completed project, and it will have all the buttons on display inside, matched up to a story that you can pull out and read. So I really want to do more projects like that that involve the community and working with not just my voice, but other voices. I feel like that's been a really important thing for me this year also, is growing my idea of how I create artist books, expanding what that can look like and what that can be like. I had another thought on that vein. What was it? Kate's the secretary of the Book Arts Guild, so I'm always counting on her to be taking notes and keeping us on track. Where can I go? Oh, I did want to talk about subscriptions. Thank you. Amy knows. So I think I'm ready to start a new subscription, and I wanted to pass around a piece of paper if you would like to sign up with your name and your email, and please write very clearly, because if that's the only way I have to contact you and it's wrong, I will never find you. You can add your mailing address, because I will have to get that from you eventually, but I'm also going to be starting a newsletter and doing an email newsletter. So if you want to be on that, and I will also put the subscription out on that. So you can sign up. I'll pass this around. These are blank pages from the History of Women's Underwear book.
Where is that book, by the way?
It's downstairs in one of the cases. It's kind of open. There's probably one up here. If you want it pulled out, we could pass it around. If that's permissible, Amy, because I think it's my copy that's down in the gallery.
How do you get a button to you with the story?
Well, so
Or
the
is that
submissions have closed now, but I have this vision of having a show with Button Box and having the community come in and being able to pin up a button in a story, like for the duration of the show, that people would come in and they would be inspired to bring a button, and then to actually maybe be able to have another container if people wanted those to stay together and be something that could be part of that, like that it would have a way to keep growing and collect stories, I think would be really, really awesome.
Like a little annex.
Yeah. It might not be as finely made of a box, but I just love that idea of having like a time capsule or a place where if you have a special button or a special story, that it could come and it would have a home forever, you know? I'm not requiring that all the stories be about buttons. People are writing about not a particular button, but sometimes it's just a text with the word button in it. One person wrote about the killings in Orlando in the nightclub, and she just has a reference to the buttons on the shirts that people were wearing at the time. And some people are writing about a specific button. Some people have written about like the collecting of shells for buttons and how that's affected the ocean life, the plant life, the chain cycle. That would be Raina's if you want to talk to her about it. I hope people don't mind me pointing them out. This is a revealing history of women's underwear. And this is the one book that has the photopolymer pages, printed text. And that's because everything is so tightly registered left to right and had to fit in so intensely. Jessica Spring did that for me. And then all the underwear items are pressure printed. And this was actually the inspiration for the clothing that you see downstairs on the big sheets of paper that are pressure printed. After this book came out, Jessica said, hey, what if we collaborated and did some clothing, some actual real size clothing on the press and created a series? We could only do children's clothing, given the limitations of the press size. But this book was the inspiration for those prints. So I'm glad that you asked about it.
It's such an amazing technique, and I would have forgotten that I'd seen it, but that's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard. It's a challenging book to display. You either have to show an image or a text page. But I'm sorry, Kate. But it also opens to suggest a dress, and then you're kind of peeking in. And this all came about at a lecture at the UW that Sandra was doing, Sandra Krupa, the curator there. She had set up all of these things and had the Book Arts Guild come and visit. And I saw a book that had, remember that man's name? You know who I'm talking about? That folded, it was an altered book where he had folded in the corners. Yeah, the French one. And it reminded me of like the Girl Scout projects where we made the Christmas trees for Reader's Digest every year, where you fold them in and then you spray paint them gold. And it was sitting right next to this Victorian image of like a Godey's Ladies print. And I saw the big bells, hoops, and I saw that and I was like, oh, I think an idea is happening. And what would it be like if you just like could peek in there and see like what they were wearing under those skirts? And I actually brought some early copies in and showed them to Kate and said, what do you think of this? And I like to watch people handle books. I'm going to make, I'm going to bind a copy together of some papers that are where my ideas are going, and I'm going to hand them to people, and I'm going to see what they do with it and how they handle it, especially something like Soil Dwellers, which is just a little complicated and has multiple folds and pages. I want to see what people do so I can see if they're engaging the work in the way that I'm hoping that they'll engage the work. Are they seeing everything? Are they knowing where to look? Can they fold it back together? All of those are really important to me. When it gets to be non-traditional. So I was bringing all kinds of things into Kate. And I also think that was at a time when I thought that the history of women's underwear was from the waist down. But it turns out that it's mostly from the waist up. Because women didn't wear underwear for a really, really long time. So it really changed my idea of what the book was going to be. I had to add a top. You can pass it around. Yeah, it changed the shape of things. So all my early little book dummies are just like skirts. And then as I did more and more and more research, it was like I had to create the top part of the book. So Yeah, everyone just wore like a chemise, which was a men's shirt. And the chemise was worn between the body and their outer clothing. And people didn't bathe a lot historically. And so the chemise was to protect their clothing from the smell and dirt of their bodies. So you'll see those chemises when you watch, old movies and things. They have the little ruffle that comes around and here and there, and that's the chemise. And it was really an undergarment. So, and then the pantaloons came about because what I read was there was a Parisian ballerina who came to London and performed on stage to much scandal because there was nothing underneath her skirt. And it was so scandalous that the next night she wore little pantaloons, which were men's pantaloons, which was more scandalous than nothing at all. Seriously. And what happened was this craze started from this, and that craze was to go for a Sunday swing. And women would be on the swing with their skirts, and their bow would be like, sometimes you'd have one pushing you and one would be there, and they had nothing on above their stockings and below their garters. Nothing. And so the Sunday swing became popularized, and I could not believe what I learned researching the history of underwear. It was hysterical. 10 minutes? Thank you so much, Amy. So since I only have a few minutes and I want to save some time for questions, I want to show you one more thing. I have a couple things over here on the table, and I printed these up this week right away. They might be still wet. This is a quote, Glasses, by Anne Frank. It says, "I firmly believe that nature brings solace in all troubles." And I printed these as a fundraiser for Standing Rock. And so I'm taking donations for them, and I brought 2 other things if people would like to take something away and leave a donation. I chose this quote by Anne Frank for 2 reasons. One was that it was about nature, and the other was because that was a young person. And the movement at Standing Rock was begun by young people who wanted to protect their way of life and the water. And so all the money that I make from these, or not that I make, but that is donated for them, I will give to the Standing Rock Zoo and the efforts there to protect their water, protect their treaty rights, and to maintain, at a minimum, the life they have, and if not a better life, meaning that all of their treaty rights and things will be more fully honored in the future. So if you'd like to make a donation for any one of these things, there's a few Venus things, and there's some of these that I made for, I think this was my 10th anniversary show that I had in 2002 at Wessel and Lieberman. And it's little May customs is what this is, because I'm May Day Press, and I was born on May Day, so I've always had a little love of May customs. So those are there. I have a few more subscription items up here, and I also brought some of these flexagons. So if you haven't seen these, I've made 2, and this is one, and they just go round and round. Well, Kristen would love it if I taught a workshop here. We've talked about it. It just hasn't happened yet. They're online. They're not hard. You just have to, it looks harder than I think it is. So I'll pass one down and you can play with them if you want. And plant dyes from the kitchen. So this was from my earlier subscription, and these are little plant dyes on each page with a word of text. I don't know that I'm going to promise that the entire subscription that I start will be plant themed, but I can tell you that the very first item that I've already started will be akin to this, only it's going to use eco paper, and each page is a particular plant. They're going to be bigger pages than this, but each one will have one eco-printed plant on it with the name of that plant. And I'm working on another element for the book. So just a little hint there of what it is. And I'm going to use the side-sewn binding, but it's going to be a different design. So I'm working on that. So that's why I wanted to show you that. That was my reminder for that. Any questions? Anything anyone's curious about?
I'll tell you, I do handmade Christmas cards every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent one of these out one year
Wow.
with instructions. It was a total failure. I mean, people just
Yeah, people struggle with it.
struggle.
They do. They struggle.
Once you get it, you can't forget it.
There's a lot more videos online now that people can look up. Yeah.
What is it called?
It's a flexagon.
Flexagon.
So my first one I did as a keepsake for another group of 65 people. And I was gluing them together on the airplane, and oh, it was insane. This book I sewed together on my honeymoon for my subscribers.
It has a recipe for
Oh, okay. So Amy held this up. It has how to make a flexagon inside, and I believe it also has this inside, Stack the Deck. Alyssa put in a couple of my projects into some of her books, and I don't know if this is that book that has them, but she's put my work in twice. So anyway, if anyone wants to see that.
I was really impressed with the gift shop downstairs and the range of art books that they have.
Oh yeah,
That
the
was
shop
really
is great.
impressive, yeah.
Yes. Anything else? Any other questions?
Do we have time for a question?
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about, at the talk down in the theater with Craft in America, about the difference between the typesetting, which is so precise, and I'm fascinated
Yeah,
by that,
yeah.
you do that. The precise typesetting, and then this loose, beautiful, uncontrollable almost, other than putting it in there. How do you, could you?
Yeah. So I think I went through a big change. In 2011, I went back to school. I was feeling like all my work was feeling the same to me, or I didn't know how to push my limits. I didn't know how to surprise myself or challenge myself to go somewhere different in my work. So I went back to school in 2011. I studied film and video and creative nonfiction. I did not study book arts or printmaking because they didn't really have an instructor there who knew very much. Printmaking, yes, but not artist books. And so I just studied these other fields. It was really fascinating and interesting for me. And it was out of that I started doing the digital prints that are down in the gallery, which are raw images that go into an audio file. And you make audio edits. You can't see what you're doing. And then you kick them back out as an image. And then I would make more changes and I would put them back in. And it's akin to me of like the eco-printing process where you're bundling up a piece of paper with plants and you're throwing it in a boiling pot and then you see what comes out. Like you don't know. I mean, you can guess. You know that onion skins will do this color and this will do that color. But plants also react to each other and do different things. And not everything stays where you put it. And things happen, right? Sometimes they come unbundled in the pot. You just don't know what's going to happen. And for me, it was a challenge to let myself let go and, stop fussing, which was really important. My last quarter at Evergreen, I did a contract with the printmaking instructor, and my contract was, you will have no end product at the end of this quarter. You only get to experiment That is all, and that was what I was going to be evaluated on.
Freedom.
Would I
Yeah.
play? Would I experiment? Would I stop trying to just like create this end thing that, you know, I'm an artist, I sell my work, so like, you know, here's something. I'm just like always going for that goal. So I was really trying to give myself a space where I could just push on those confinements I was feeling, and I was feeling really stuck creatively. And I'm not going to be a fine bookbinder. Letterpress is so fussy. I don't want to start being a fine bookbinder. It's like that's just two fussy fields. Like one is enough. So you know, a lot of my books are sewn very simply. I don't use a lot of glue. I try to just approach that in a really simple, easy way, because I really do like to focus on the printing and the sort of the concept of the book and bringing things together. But it's been really great to just break out of that somewhat, and also to collaborate more. And that's, to me, the great thing about collaborating, is that it brings in other voices, it brings in someone to move against, someone who you'll critique each other, you'll challenge each other. Hopefully, you know, you can do that. And so I'm trying to collaborate more in the same ways to bring about, you know, new challenges for myself of doing something, creating something. And so Button Box is a perfect example of really different. Okay, that's it. We're out of time. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.